Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Laura Fenimore, and I'm part of the Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles team at the Foundation for Inner Peace. We are holding these Let's Discuss online webinars as an expression of our vision of extending love through the teachings of A Course in Miracles. We are so grateful that so many of you are attending these webinars. Our chat room will be open and monitored by Deborah and Emmanuel. Please be aware that our presenters will not be answering live questions. Today's webinar is titled, Thank God There Is No Death, presented by Judy Skutch Whitson, the Foundation for Inner Peace's founder and the chairwoman of the board of directors, along with our two co-presidents, Dr. Bob Rosenthal and Tam Morgan. I'd like to invite us all to join hearts and hands through this prayer to connect and unite us all with the Holy Spirit. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent Him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal. Now I want to present Judy, Dr. Bob, and Tam, and we're going to begin with Dr. Bob. Welcome.
Thank you, Laura, for another lovely and wonderful introduction. Today's topic, as you know, is death, and in honor of that, I wore an old Grateful Dead hat of mine. This is a skeleton with a starburst in the middle of it, which seemed very appropriate for the day. So I suspect that if we had the time and we went around, we all remember roughly when we became conscious of the idea of death. I think I was about 8 years old, and I remember lying in my bed at night, trying to get to sleep because I had some insomnia back in those days. And it suddenly occurred to me, there will come a day when I'm not here, where I'm just gone. There's a nothingness. And then it further occurred to me that that was true for my mother, my father, my siblings, my friends, and everybody I knew. It was a very depressing thought, and I couldn't find any way out of it at the time. So I think I just kind of shoved it off to the side and was like, yeah, let's deal with this one later. But the idea of death, of the disappearance or the demise of that which we think we are and everything else in this world, is something that I really truly believe we all share. In fact, it's one of the few things that everyone who's born into a body shares, because we all know that the body won't last. In order to cope with death, people come up with all kinds of different strategies and runarounds. There's the materialist approach. It's all the body, and your consciousness comes from the brain, and when the brain dies and the body dies, poof, there you go. There is no more you. And that's just the way it is. There's sort of the more traditional religious take where, well, part of you dies, but your soul will live on, maybe in hell, maybe in heaven, maybe in some, underworld. Or if we go Eastern, you're going to die, but you're going to get reincarnated and you'll come back again. Of course, the problem with these is that the you that you know is still gone. And if you get reincarnated, terrific, but you're no longer you. Whoever gets reincarnated is not you and will probably have no memory whatsoever for who you were or what you were about, except in some unusual and strange circumstances. So that's kind of where I'm guessing 99.9% of people in the world fall on the topic of death. A Course in Miracles teaches us something very different, though. The Course is a non-dual teaching. So to understand what the Course says about death, you need to also understand what it says about life, what it says about the universe, what it says about who we are. So for those who are long established course students, this is going to be a bit of a repeat. Please bear with me. We can all stand to hear these things more. For those who are new, this could be very, very confusing. I hope not. I'll do my best. But I want to try to sort of sketch out the outlines, at the very least, of what A Course in Miracles teaches us, because within that much broader context, death becomes something very, very different than what we all grew up to understand it to be. So, what is a non-dual teaching? Well, A Course in Miracles tells us that there's only one reality, only one truth, and we might as well capitalize reality and truth, because that's, you know, when that's all there is, that's equivalent to God. And that one truth is God. It's everything, always, all the time. Nothing else exists. It's also pure love. It's a consciousness of the deepest peace and calm. It has no opposite, because how can that which is everything have an opposite? Nothingness is literally impossible and unthinkable, because everything is everything. There is, you know, you can't come up with a nothingness in the realm of everything. So that is the reality, and that is our reality. According to A Course in Miracles, God created what it calls his Son, his creation, by extending his being, his love, his peace, his oneness, and that gave rise to the Son. And the Son has the same abilities as the Father and can extend to his creations, and on and on and on and on and on. Now, if you look around, we've come a long way from that. So the question arises, how the hell did we get here? And it's a good question, because compared with the oneness, this is hell. And what the Course teaches us in brief is that somehow this utterly bizarre thought came into the mind of the Son. Don't ask me how. It's one of those unanswerables that's truly not worth spending time on. But this thought came into the mind of the Son that was essentially, what if I were separate from my Father? What would that be like? And all of a sudden, boom, the power of mind is such that that world popped into being. However, the mind of the created cannot change what is the creator. You know, we're lower in the chain of creation. We can't reach up and change who created us or change what the nature of our creation is. So this world that's based on separation came up in our mind only. It's delusional, it's psychotic, it's insane, and the Course uses those words. But if you've ever seen someone who's delusional and psychotic, they very much believe in their inner world that they've created. And if you try to argue them or rationalize them out of it, you're not going to get terribly far. So in this world that we live in, there's nothing eternal. It's a world of time, it's a world of space, it's a world of separation. We are all seemingly separate beings, separate bodies, separate life histories, and we run around pursuing our own separate interests. Frequently, we ally with other people who have the same interest and a common good, but there is never a perfect union or a perfect joining that even gets close to our original state, what we were created as. Now, as separate beings and limited beings, death is kind of woven all through this world. Nothing is here that will not change and die. It is the hallmark of this world. You know, look at anything around you. It will not last. When you see pictures of ghost towns or photos of Chernobyl, it's been abandoned now for, I don't know what, 30 plus years. It's already falling apart. You know, the weeds come through, everything changes, and ultimately everything dies. Astrophysicists tell us, you know, our sun will die, our galaxy will die, our universe will die. Very uplifting, heartening stuff to think about. But the Course has a much more uplifting message. It says, yeah, within the dream, everything dies because it's a dream. Dreams aren't real. Within the dream, there can be monsters, there can be angels. You can be the hero, you can be the villain, you can be the goat, you can be the savior, but none of it lasts, none of it will be real, none of it will endure. And this is a real problem because in order to have deep level trust, we have to know that something is certain and is finite. If you're doing pretty well right now, but at any moment an asteroid could come smashing through your rooftop and you're gone, you don't have a whole lot of security to live by. You know, I've met many people with more money than probably all of us put together who are still deeply, deeply terrified at the thought that they could lose all their money. So if it isn't eternal, if it doesn't last, it doesn't lend itself to trust and security. Now, you may have noticed that because this world is our collective delusion, it has nothing to do with God. This is where A Course in Miracles flies in the face of traditional religion. God did not create this world. God's Son made it, and the Course distinguishes those two words. Create is reserved for God and God's creations. Made is what we do with the world. So we made the world. It has nothing to do with God, and we made it in the image of its creator, the image of separation. The Course states in, I think, more than one place, that separation is death. It's the attempt to believe that we can be distinct from God who created us. So here in this world, you know, party, 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 because you never know when it's going to all end, and at some point, you know, cash in your chips and say goodbye. The Course takes this further in lesson 163, there is no death, the Son of God is free, and says that any thought that isn't supremely joyous is essentially a thought of death. If you're depressed, if you're ashamed, if you're angry, you know, if you're feeling a loss, all of these are variations in form on the thought of death. Why? Because they're thoughts of limits. They're not anchored in that supreme sense of oneness, of love. And the Course tells us that our goal as separate beings is to undo all the things that we've made that get in the way of remembering our true nature. We're psychotic, we're delusional. We can't do that on our own. We literally are incapable of it because we're invested in this world that we made. But God created an entity that the Course calls the Holy Spirit that is part of the oneness. It's actually part of our original created mind, which the Course calls the Christ. And yet it has the ability to extend here into the world of form. Why? Because we can't undo the nature of our creation. And so that which is real in us is also still here. Love is still here. It's just harder to find because we've blocked it. So with the help of the Holy Spirit, we can undo all of these symbols of death, these symbols of fear. Now, we've got to be gentle and gracious with ourselves. If bad things happen, if you get a terminal cancer diagnosis, if a child gets very sick or dies, if your home is burned to the ground in a wildfire, or you're floating in 5 feet of water, don't expect that you're going to be some saint and transcend it all and go, oh, well, that's okay. You know, I'm love and nothing else exists. You might have to go through it. You might have to grieve. You might have to scream. You might get really mad. That's okay. That is the purpose of time, is to give us time to move through that which blocks us from the awareness of love's presence. Because death and all of its representations, if it were real, would prove that God is not real. If limits are real, then there can't be eternity, there can't be oneness, there can't be any of that. Can't even say God would be dead. God never existed. It would be the pure materialist paradigm. But by the other hand, if all that is real is life, and death is just this artifact of this insanity that we fell into, then our job is to gradually and in the best way we can, with the help of the Holy Spirit, undo the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is our natural inheritance. And I hope that gives, as I said, sort of a sketch, of what the Course says about the whole kit and caboodle, because you have to have that sense in order to understand how death is positioned within the Course. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner Tam and Judy, who has brought me into this beautiful system of A Course in Miracles. And I think we're going to have a great webinar.
Thank you, Bob, ever so much for setting the scene, as it were, to how we can say, thank God there is no death. Because in the dream in which we find ourselves living, death seems very real indeed. But that's what it is, a part of the dream. A dream that we made to keep ourselves away from the knowledge of who we really are. There is no death, but there is a belief in death. And the belief is very strong indeed. When I first started studying the Course many years ago, and I came upon these concepts, they seemed kind of familiar. In other words, there was some kind of early preparation in my life and then my adulthood to be attracted to these ideas. So it wasn't strange, but I hadn't practiced. And there was the difference. I hadn't experienced, I hadn't practiced. There is no death, but there is a belief in death. And what does that belief do to us? And how do we choose it? And why do we choose it? And can we stop choosing it? Well, our delightful and wonderful co-scribe of the Course, Bill Thetford, at the very end of his life, died about a few feet in front of my home. And he had spent the night before and the morning with me and was about to go for his walk. And I had never, in all the years I'd seen him and known him well, seen him so tipsy. I felt that he was tipsy on life and tipsy on love. And he was literally this very tall man, well over 6'3", was standing on his tippy toes and dancing around our living room and saying, I'm free, I'm free, I'm finally free. And when I asked him, was he on something? Or what did he mean? He said he felt free and unrestrained because all his relationships were in order. There was total forgiveness in him and forgiving himself for this dream of life. And then he died. The Course tells us that we enter the happy dream when we've removed the obstacles to the recognition of peace and love, the barriers that we put up. And watching Bill dance around my living room hours before he died and telling me he was free, he was finally free, and seeing it and knowing it, because that wasn't the way he usually acted, I realized that even for a few moments, we can enter that place of the happy dream where we are absolutely positive that there is no death and we are not attached to this world, to these thoughts of a world anymore. When I read in the Course very early on, because I think in the first edition it came on page 28, and I'll paraphrase, the Course was saying, the Bible tells us, and it does make many references to the Bible, St. James Version, the Bible tells us that God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. And the Course continues, and in no place does it ever say Adam awakened. I thought, wow, it is a dream. We got the clues all through history. It's a dream. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream, a childhood song that many of us who are my age and maybe a little bit younger have known and sung as a round many times. Life is but a dream. Oh, we see it in poetry all along, and we think it's fanciful, and we think it's kind of nice too. Mysticism has always been around since I can remember, way before me. So we've always had, as humanity, as the separated self, the desire to go home, to our real home. When I was 3 years old, I fell out a window. Now, it wasn't very high up, so I wasn't hurt. But as I was falling out, there was something in my child mind that shifted into, let's say, my more real mind. And all I could think is, I want to go home, I want to go home. And when my parents saw, they were sitting right with me when it happened, and they ran outside and they picked me up and took me to the doctor. I was still crying, I want to go home, I want to go home. And finally we came back to the house and they said, see, you're home now, you're home. And I said, no, this is not home. And they thought, well, I probably bumped my head, and I was reacting to that. I knew that I meant it wasn't home, but I didn't know what home was. Luckily, spontaneously, I had an experience when I was about 9 years old that showed me something beyond the body that was so powerful I have never forgotten. It's been since my lodestone of a feeling I want to always have. A feeling where you are not conscious of being a self or a body. You're just conscious of being a thought of love that extends into the universe forever. And you also know what that is. And in this experience, I remember at 9 years old saying over and over again, now I know, now I know, now I know, as if I had been asking the question. I'm sure many people have had experiences, and hopefully you can relate to some of these, because in telling of the stories, I'm really reminding myself, of course, that there really is no death and there's nothing to fear. Fear creates, allows, makes the attitude of death possible. There is no death. There is no death. Thank God there is no death, because what God created shares his life. There is no death because an opposite to God does not exist. There is no death because the Father and the Son are one. So what the Course is telling us over and over again is death is an impossibility in your reality, in your real state of mind, in your life with the all, the infinite, whatever we want to call it, and the names don't matter, the thought does. The Course reminds us that a universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is not only possible, but necessary. And I'm going to refer to some of these universal experiences that we have that hopefully will symbolize yours, and you'll be reminded and you'll know why we say, thank God, there is no death. Years ago, and I can point to years ago now because I'm years on. Years ago, when I first recognized Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that very well-known doctor who started to really publicize her deep belief and experiments with the near-death experience, she lectured, and I met her quite a few times along the way and shared with her some of my views. This was before the Course. And she kept telling me, you know, I'm talking about the near-death experience because so many of my patients have had it, and they know when they come out of it that they either died on the table or they didn't die but came close to it. But they know when they came out of it, they experienced something quite remarkable. It was called beyond the body. She said, but I know what I'm really talking about is the deathlessness of our reality, the deathlessness. And I started to think about that. Well, I had experiences that led me to open my eyes more and more. And one of them was the birth of my daughter, Tam, who appears here, who was the little child who led me. And because she came with a natural ability, she seems to, some children are born artistic, some musical, some like horses, whatever. She came in, it seems, with a natural ability to go beyond her five senses and to be able to experience that which I felt was true but didn't really know. She acted as knowing. And it was interesting to watch, but she was a very little girl, so we didn't have any philosophical conversations, but that she performed in ways to show me that that was true. And therefore, I started my studies again at New York University to do some work in the newly formed department that they had. Basically, it was called psychic exploration or parapsychology. And finally, it was named experimental parapsychology. And after a while, I guess there were no more courses for me to take. So they asked me to teach. And the very, very first class I had, I was curious because so many people showed up. This was not undergraduate, by the way. It was postgraduate for adults, or adult education, as they called it. So it was in the evening, and I expected how many, 10, 15 people to come tired from work to sit down and see what this lady had to say. Instead, about 350 people showed up at the first class. And to introduce the subject, I needed to know who are these people. And so I did indeed ask them, whoever could and would, stand up and say, why are you here? What drew you to the class on experimental parapsychology? Or as I used to call it, things that go bump in the night. Every single one of them had had an experience with a relative who died. They just wanted to know, did other people? They wanted to find out, was it true? Was it real? I heard so many stories that I was glad to have been put in that position to be with them and in the framework of experimental parapsychology, to be able to talk about these things. Now, the course wasn't in my life yet, but as I said, my little daughter was. I found out that there was literature from today, it's 100 years ago at least, that had been through this very, very carefully in an experimental way, particularly in a very thick tome that F.W.H. Myers, the classical scholar in Britain, had written, and that he had, along with others, documented these kinds of cases of people who had experiences of someone who had recently died. And in this documentation, there was such an abundance of it, and there were judgments of other people who had even witnessed the same thing. So it wasn't just someone's figment of the imagination, maybe. It was two people's figment of the imagination, but it was very definitely documented. And it was called Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death by F.W.H. Myers. I read that book. I used to carry it around with me. Obviously, you get the drift of the story at a very early age. By this time, I was in my 40s. There was some kind of inner preparation going on. An inner preparation that would allow me to be able to, when the course came into my life, slip into these ideas and find out finally how can I possibly achieve them? How can I bring back that experience of oneness, that experience of bodily disappearance, and feel that I was eternal? My grandmother, to whom I was very close, was watching me with all this parapsychology and her favorite great-grandchild, Tamara. And she didn't participate, but I could see that she was interested. And she was very old. She was in her 90s. And Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia at that time, was doing a study on does human consciousness survive bodily death? And he was using a combination padlock as the tool. That's another story for another time. And he was using various people who would participate as mediums. And then he was asking anyone who wanted to set a combination padlock to a word of 6 letters and send it to him. And then when that person died, he should be informed. And then the mediums would try to see whether that person could communicate and open the lock at the other end. because of that, and my grandmother agreed to do it, when she died, a series of events for 1 year unfolded that brought me to such a pitch of acceptance that the very last medium I saw on behalf of my grandmother's inner direction and through the aegis of the American Society for Psychical Research, because I was working with a doctor and an organization that was scientifically based. The very year that I took to be able to do this and document it, I was actually at the very, very last medium that I would see. The program was going to be finished. And at that time, I realized, as she told me, that this would be the last session and that I was being prepared. Prepared was the word, to be able to receive a document that was going to be published. And I should be patient because this would happen soon. Well, of course, that's something in the future. There was no way to judge and measure that. But it was even that clear that even that whole year of, I could say, learning that I had believed that there might be no death, I now knew there wasn't. I think Carl Jung said it so much better. It might be apocryphal, but Dr. Carl Jung of Switzerland, the famous psychologist who was one of Freud's top students, when someone asked him, did he believe in God? And he thought for a second, he said, no, I don't believe in God. Now I know. That's the way I felt about this preparation, I'll call it, for the course. I already knew personally. Some of the experiences, I have many, too many to tell you, but some of the experiences, I would much rather you hear from Tamara, my daughter, who was once the little child who led me. So Tamara, you're on.
Hi, everyone. My mother told me I should interrupt her when I want to come in, but it's too wonderful to get to listen to what she has to say. So we are love. How can we be death? Well, we talk about mixing levels. And I had a very different experience from my co-president partner, Dr. Bob. In my first experience of hearing even the word death. And actually, no, not true. My first experience was when a parakeet died. My pet parakeet died. So I had heard the word death. But questioning it came when I was 5 years old, and we were in a car accident where we went off, my father was driving, and we went off a bridge, and we were kind of dangling. And my brother in the back seat with me was hysterical crying, and my mother turned around, as I remember it, and she said, honey, calm down, it's going to be okay. Look at your sister, she's not going crazy. And she didn't say going crazy, but I was quiet. And I remember him saying, he was 3.5 years older than I was. I remember him saying, she doesn't understand what death is. She doesn't know what's going on right now. And I had a very profound moment of looking and thinking, I know what death is. I've been here before, so have you, in all of these many forms. And I also know I'm not supposed to be done right now. And it was a really deep experience. And there have been experiences in my life at my life's worst where I want to be out. And I hear, nope, you're not getting out of it that easily. There's still more to be done here. And that's to experience and understand that we are love and be awake into that. And the course has been a tremendous discipline and way to help me focus my mind and remember that. But when my cat died, who was with me for 20 years, she went through a marriage with me, and we both strangely got pregnant on the same day, but not by the same being, thank God. She died, and I had brushed her just the day before she died, and there was a big fur ball in the garbage in my bedroom. And I was so sad that she was gone. I felt this presence in bed with me for 20 years. And when I started to cry, I felt her being right next to me purring. And the purring was getting louder and louder. And I heard myself say, stop, stop. And I got up and I went to the garbage and I lifted the big fur ball and looked over at where I heard that purring and felt that purring and said, don't you understand? I want and need to cry over this empty little bunch of dirty fur, instead of choosing at that moment to experience that which was still there, that presence of love that couldn't go away no matter what I did. And the realization now, as I partner with my mother, who is on a slow, hopefully slow way out. My father just died a couple of months ago. Not Bob Skutch, who people think is my father, but my actual biological father, whose name was Howard. And the experience of choosing to mourn, choosing to suffer, choosing to feel that before I choose to remember that there's no death has been an amazing experience for me, because the deeper I get into knowing that we are all loved, to knowing that nothing can kill that, also in having the personal experiences with the ones I love who are disappearing, the learning deep of what surrender is and letting go is, but more than anything, the choice. Which one do I want to choose now? Which one do I want to be? Which one do I want to live in? And sometimes it is actually the choice to suffer. And I'm taking that responsibility. But the more I know I choose that, the more I know I'm not actually being that which we are. And so I'm using the Course to teach me the discipline. But there also is an honoring, or so it feels, in the mourning process, as Dr. Bob showed us. So there are so many examples of it. We have so many stories, but one last story I'm going to say before I hand it back to my mother is that I desperately wanted to have a baby girl. And I came from a long, fabulous matriarchal line of being very close and living with my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother for a time. And so I wanted to have a baby girl. And I married a man who didn't want to have any kids. He agreed to have one child, and it needed to be a boy. And I needed to find out that he was a boy way early so I could cry and then embrace him as the boy. Little did I know he showed me that there is no gender. But I was still wanting this little girl that was my image of what I needed to have to feel complete. And I found out when my son was about 3 years old that I was going through early menopause and I would never have another child. And that night I had a dream that there was a little flame inside me. And I went to it and I asked it in the dream, "Who are you? What are you?" And she said, "My name is Blaze, and I am your daughter, and I will be here whether you see me or not. I will always be with you." And I was so moved by this presence, and it woke me up. Just the love, and it woke me up, and I was bathing in this light of, I have Blaze, and she will always be with me. And at that point, my son woke up in the other room, and he was close to 3. Not quite yet. And he called me in, and it was about 5:30 in the morning. I went into his room, and he said, I got in bed with him, and he said, "Mommy, what does Blaze mean?" And I was stunned. And I told him the definition of Blaze, and I said, "Why do you ask?" And he said, "Oh, because that's my sister." And I was very surprised. I didn't respond. I just said, "Oh, that's nice." I went back into my room. I told my husband. And later that day, I found out the blood tests were inaccurate and I was pregnant. So I had a deep, deep, deep connection with this being And 10 weeks into the pregnancy, I started to have a miscarriage. And I was so attached to this being. It's like, no, don't leave. It seems so fated that you be here, and you know, all the stories we give ourselves for what needs to happen instead of complete surrender. And after the miscarriage, I had sent my son to be with someone for that night to take care of him. I didn't want him around. And the next day he came back, and I was with him and loving him and really quieting myself. And there were some flowers, dead flowers in the kitchen. And I went to throw the flowers out, and my son said, "What are you doing? Why are you throwing out those flowers?" And I said, "Because they're dead." And he said, what's that mean? And so I started to explain what death was. And one of the things that came out was, well, the good news about, I said, everything you see is organic and it comes to life. But if it has life in it rather than just a table, but a plant at some point will die. And that's can be very sad. But the good news is that everything you see has been born and the energy will always be there. And my son looked at me and he said, "Not my sister." And it was such a profound moment that I couldn't even answer it at that time. But we did double back, and he always felt his sister was with him. I always felt she was and is with me. So we can live in two worlds. We can actually let that which wants to talk to us come in. I gave so much to my father before he died, and I keep feeling him wanting to come in, and I keep saying, "Not yet, I need a break." But I welcome you in, and it's just an energy in the heart that presents itself in form. And we all can connect with that. We can feel it. We get messages from that energy. And I just wanted to share that as I pass this back to you, Mom.
Lesson 152 in A Course in Miracles had a line that really shocked me. Obviously, already I was very open to the ideas that we are split-minded. Part of our mind thinks we're living in this world, and even though I know it's a dream, I live in it just as if it seemed real. The other part is the one we can access, our right mind, which tells us we are eternal and we're already at home. So to read in lesson 152, no one dies without his own consent. No one dies without his own consent. It was a mind opener. It was a shocker in the sense that immediately I started to think of all those beings, animals, people, etc., bugs. Do they all consent to die? Doesn't look like it, until I realized what the Course was talking about, and it does indeed explain it. In our wrong-mindedness, the ego was made, and death is the central part of it. But in our right-mindedness, which is connected to the Holy Spirit within, and through that Holy Spirit to God, is the knowledge that, yes, we make choices because we have that inner decision maker that connects with our higher self, that helps us make the decisions. So even though our ordinary, everyday consciousness that we call ego would not accept the fact that I didn't choose this, at some level, our higher self knows better because it's eternal and it sees this as lesson learning. We're all on a grand lesson learning, a journey without distance to a goal that has never changed, to come back to our real self where we live. Of course, when you live long enough, you do go through many experiences of death, and I've had my share. They're all equal when you're grieving, especially when you deeply love someone, like a father, a mother, a sister, a grandmother, a child, a husband. It can be devastating when the body is gone, which you attach so much importance to, and rightly so in this dream. In every single one of them, as I examine them, either I'm the luckiest person in the world or I'm a little conscious. There isn't one of the list of people I was extremely close to who died where I do not see that he chose his own death, consented, even though they may not have seemed to be actively realizing it. There was enough said, enough communication, enough words used, enough ideas communicated that was so. An example, I had only one sibling in my life, my younger sister, Carol, and she and her husband were 9 years younger than I. Her husband, 7 years younger than I. And I was visiting with my mother with them at their country home on Nantucket Island. And my brother-in-law had his own plane. And since I absolutely had a passion to fly, he let me fly his plane, not taking it up and landing, but of course, once we were in the air, and I had a wonderful time. My sister wouldn't go on the plane at all. She didn't like it, she didn't want to. And when we were leaving them, I could see that she was quite moody. And I wondered, of course, guilt, what'd I do, what'd I say? And when I finally got to my destination with my mom, I called her up and I said, are you okay? And she was crying. And I said, what's the matter? Did we say anything? Did we do anything to make you unhappy? She said, oh, no. I knew when we said goodbye, I would never see you again. I said, you're coming to Mom's 80th birthday party in California next week. So of course I want to see you again. She said, I know, but I also know I'm never going to see you again. And a few days later, she and her husband went up in their small plane and they were never seen again. And so I never saw either of them again. Was it a great shock for the family? Of course it was. Was there great mourning? Yes, particularly with their children, who were not small children. They were young adults, but of course, mother and father disappearing at once. I would have loved to have been able to discuss with them why she said that. But then I found out she had told someone else, her next door neighbor, when Stephen and I aren't here anymore, will you take the dog? No one sabotaged their plane as far as I know. There was that within my sister, who was a professed atheist, by the way, that knew she would never see us again. And not only that, and her husband too. How could that happen? What did that mean? I felt for me, who was the survivor here, it was tremendously important for me to know and to believe that she had some part in this. Otherwise, it was useless and meaningless. And that helped me a lot. That deep faith that no one dies without his own consent took the level of grief from the body and the missing and the disaster that was left behind to a place where I could take a deep breath and surrender to God and say, I know it's for a purpose. I don't need to know what the purpose is. I only need to know that we continue. Now, we are told through the course that we are on a learning journey. The journey that I mentioned, without distance to a goal that has never changed. We're on a learning journey. When we leave our bodies behind, what happens then? The Course tells us, sometimes obliquely and sometimes not so obliquely. We continue. Death is not an end. That's just a mistaken idea. It's not an end at all. What do we continue doing? Well, we don't get a handbook for that. Maybe that's the post-Course in Miracles, but right now, studying A Course in Miracles, we can consider death as a passage. I'd like to think of it as a graduation. We have done, experienced, learned what we need to in this dream of a lifetime, and that's what time is for. It doesn't stop because the body is discarded or lost at sea or gets sick and decays. It continues, the learning, that which we are in essence continues learning. And so to me, right now, at about almost nearing 90 years old, I'm looking forward to death as a graduation present. I'm thinking what a wonderful joy it will be to go through this experience with no fear. I watched Bill Thetford do it. I watched my husband do it. I saw Ken Wapnick do it. I watched my grandmother do it. I watched my mother do it. My mother even told me she'd be dead in 4 days when we were all out to dinner and had seen a movie. And she was. Happily. Toodaloo. Ready to go. Disappeared. She was lucky there was no pain, there was no suffering. Of course, when people are in pain and suffering, it seems very real indeed, and it is to us. And we do the best we can with them or ourselves. One of the reasons we have palliative care today is so death will be easier, because for some people, it's a trial. But within it all is to know that we're continually learning, and we just go on. The Course talks about mighty companions. I love that expression, mighty companions. It refers to it a few times. In one case, the mighty companions are all the thoughts of love that you ever had, ever expressed, that go with you as you leave your body. All those mighty companions go with you, you're not alone. Someplace else it talks about the mighty companions as the lessons we have learned. We take them with us. Oh, thank goodness. I was afraid I'd have to start all over again. But we are told that the mighty companions of the lessons we have learned go with us. And indeed they do. I'm wondering whether our co-president, Bob Rosenthal, has anything he wants to add to this now before we have our closing.
A couple of thoughts have come up. I think one of them, okay, so I was in a Course in Miracles study group for many years where there was one participant who basically was fascinated by near-death experiences. And although he didn't say it outright, you could tell he was convinced that death was the path to freedom. That, you know, once you died and left your body, it was all good. And the Course says, to paraphrase it, you know, the world is not left by death, but by awakening. You know, you can dream within the dream that you become something else. You can dream that the plot changes, the location can shift, but it's still a dream. And the problem with a dream, as the Course talks about in some of its later chapters, 27 in particular, is that the dreamer is part of the dream and therefore doesn't distinguish herself as separate from the dream. So you can think of death as a useful interlude, because look at it this way. We learn as much as we can in a given lifetime, but at a certain point, I think for the vast majority, we've done all we can. There's certain patterns that we just can't seem to transcend, certain people who, as hard as we try, we still find them unforgivable in some way. So death is kind of the reset button. Okay, you couldn't do it in this time, you're leaving, you'll come back. You won't forget that deep knowingness, that gnosis, that knowledge that you had. But now you can work on those same lessons from a different perspective with quote unquote different people. Because in the big picture, we're all one and the same. So it doesn't matter who we're doing this with or how it plays out. So I just wanted to make that point. Now, studying, reading about near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. I mean, I spent a lot of time at the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia, learning how to get out of your body and get that experience. And if you're called to this, if it feels like it's on path, then it's probably got something to show you, but ultimately the real value, the deep level value of these things is to reinforce that life is eternal, that even when the body perishes, the body is not the life. The body is not the self. You know, you are not your body. You are not the sum total of the stories of your past history. You are not your personality. You are not the little voice in your head that's constantly talking to you, reminding you of what you forgot to do on your to-do list. None of these are you. Your essence is so far beyond those. So death is also a very gentle and gracious way of, in a sense, like yeah, you took the history class and you learned quite a bit, but history wasn't your thing. Let's shift and we're going to do biology now. In a biology class, you think you learn different things, but you just have a different opportunity. Anything that reinforces the notion of life going on and on and on is viable. But if you get distracted, if there's a sense of, oh, this is what I want to pursue, I wouldn't say don't do it because that's not mine to say, but check in with guidance. And if it feels right, God knows I've followed many a different path in this lifetime, and look where it got me, look where I wound up. It's been my experience that for many, many people, detours from A Course in Miracles are common and sometimes very necessary. So I just wanted to say that. Yes, death is not an end, it's a pause, it's a reset, but it's not the escape from illusion. Death is the symbol of the illusion. All right, I think that's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Judy, for giving me that time.
Tam, would you like to say something? Because we still have a few minutes and then we'll close.
I would just like to say that in the No One Dies Without Their Consent, it is such a hard notion to take in, but the examples in my life have been extraordinary of that, including my father, just as they say, passing, where he ended up for 6 days in a bathroom, and I kept saying, Dad, come out, and he kept saying, I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm doing, and he orchestrated his own death. He was a very difficult, angry man until the end, where he actually acknowledged to my mother, his ex-wife, you were right, it's all about love. It's all about love. And he went on a Zoom call where his entire close family was there, including his ex-wife, my mother. And we each said to him, we love you. You've done everything you need to do. We cheer you on. And after the last person spoke, he took his last breath in front of us. And he kept telling me straight through, I know what I'm doing. So the part of that, it looked crazy what he was doing, to tell you the truth. I mean, he was doing all sorts of things that no one agreed with for him. But my job was to listen to him and say, how can I support you in your process? How can I support you in what you want to do? And it was very humorous in the end, because he died and he kept playing in the background Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way. And so we all sang that to him at the end, right after he took his last breath, his family saying, you did it your way with Frank Sinatra. What I would like to offer is, in the here and now, the most beautiful gift is to release and find ways to do the practice, to release guilt between those who are here now and you. Even past those who have gone, you can still do that work. But the thing that I am so grateful for is my mother and me together. We've really committed to allowing her to go guilt-free between both of us. And it's amazing what a challenge it is. I feel like I'm not doing enough to keep her comfortable. And I also need to have my own boundaries and my own life amidst this. And she keeps, she has an old Jewish mother in her that used to provoke guilt. And we're both being so conscious about it. And it's really touching. And it's also work, but it's rewarding work. The idea to release someone else and have them go without guilt, for me not to feel like I didn't do enough, for her to have felt that about her mother. And it's huge to remember constantly, what's the work I am here to do to awaken in this dream, not post-death, not with death. And the other one thing that I want to say very quickly is that we had a dear friend who was dying and asked me to come to his bedside in the hospital to help with his death, because I've done that before and been a midwife between the two worlds. And I was with another woman who had done this work very consciously, and I was more a novice. And I was loving him and being so present, loving him. And the heart monitor was on. And each time the heart monitor flatlined and it looked like he was gone, my body and love naturally went to him and touched his feet and sent him love for his passage. And then bam, it would go back on again. And finally, the woman next to me said, step away from the body. He is not the body. Let him go. And it was a profound lesson that love keeps us here. And so if you want to be in touch with that who you feel you have lost, go to love. Go to love. It's all still there. That's where the answer of all of this is. Thank you. Back to you, Mom.
So we sort of been all over the board today, but I think we can say it's a difficult topic, and the Course knows it is, and over again, we turn to the Course for help in these times. I mentioned that my husband died 2.5 years ago, and daily, I kept reading and rereading the sections I know he loved the most, and it helped me feel very close to him, and it also allowed all sorts of delightful little treats to come in where I felt his presence, actually felt his presence or saw evidence of it that made me feel so joyous. And instead of going through deep grief and missing, although once in a while that happened, I got a chance to celebrate him. I was with him as he died and as he was taking his last breaths. And I really didn't know what he wanted because he wasn't totally conscious. And so I did what I felt I was guided to do. I asked the Holy Spirit, please help me. And I just kept intoning in his ear, there is no death. The Son of God is free. I am not a body. I am free. You are not a body. You are free. There is no death. The Son of God is free. And as he took his very last breath, which was very quiet and very peaceful, I started to thank his body. I never heard of a thing like that. Well, I guess people do clean the body in respect and reverence, but I never had an experience of that. But I started to talk to his body and touch it, knowing he was not in it anymore, and thanking it for being the vehicle that I knew so well that brought him to me and the love that we shared. Denying the body doesn't help anything. Loving and going through it and recognizing the path home is through forgiveness, through accepting the atonement, through knowing this is a dream, through recognizing there is no death, the Son of God is free. All of those ideas are very helpful when you start to succumb to fear of death, either for yourself or for anyone else. I know terrible things are happening all over the world right now. We all do. And they touch us all, collectively and individually. We who are students of A Course in Miracles are very grateful and lucky to have the opportunity to remind ourselves there is no death. Death is only a belief. We can change our minds. How do we do that? We ask that part of ourselves which knows, the Holy Spirit, please help me see this differently. Please help me see this differently. I hope that the very last offering we have for you, which is a slide, which we will put on, and I would love to read, as is what I put on my husband's website after he died. And it's very meaningful to me. It is from the Song of Prayer in A Course in Miracles. And those of you who are here, please read it along with me. And later, think about it if you like. And if you want it, we can send it to you. Yet there is a kind of seeming death that has a different source. It does not come because of hurtful thoughts and raging anger at the universe. It merely signifies the end has come for usefulness of the body functioning, and so it is discarded as a choice, as one lays by a garment now outworn. This is what death should be, a quiet choice, made joyfully and with a sense of peace. We call it death, but it is liberty. It does not come in forms that seem to be thrust down in pain upon unwilling flesh, but as a gentle welcome to release. If there has been true healing, this can be the form in which death comes when it is time to rest a while from labor gladly done and gladly ended. And so be it. Amen.
Thank you, Judy. That was beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Bob, Tam. Thank you so much. So I want to thank everyone else here for joining us today for Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles, presented by the Foundation for Inner Peace. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, October 22nd, with Dr. Bob Rosenthal, Tam Morgan, and Judy Skutch Whitson. And the topic is questions and answers on the application of the course. For future webinars, if you cannot attend live, you must register to receive the recording in your email. And for those of you out there who are on social media, we'd love for you to join us. We've put our social media links in the chat. So we invite you to join us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Our Facebook page is called A Course in Miracles, Foundation for Inner Peace. Please go there to like us and feel free to join our private Facebook group called Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles. We all welcome your participation there. And last but not least, we really appreciate your generous donations and the support to the Foundation for Inner Peace. And we really honor your presence here. So we just look forward to seeing you soon. And until then, God bless you all.